In your mercy, Lord, you have called us from the love that says yes before we even know the question. Amen. As I was reading the gospel this week, it reminded me of one of my all-time favorite openings to a novel, Norman Maclean's novel, or novella really, A River Runs Through It. And I thought, well, I'm standing up here, so I might as well just read it to you as well, rather than let your imagination run wild. It goes, in our family, there was no clear line between religion and fly fishing. We lived at the junction of great trout rivers in western Montana, and our father was a Presbyterian minister and a fly fisherman who tied his own flies and taught others. He told us about Christ's disciples being fishermen, and we were left to assume, as my brother and I did, that all first-class fishermen on the Sea of Galilee were fly fishermen, and that John, the favorite, was a dry fly fisherman. I love this for a lot of reasons. But most particularly is that it immediately sets the stakes of the story, of this particular family's view of the world. And then it also reminds us that God often becomes manifest in the ordinary, the profane, even the seemingly unnecessary moments of our lives. However, there are some factual inaccuracies in this account. Most certainly, the disciples were not fly fishermen, although I admit to a certain romanticism surrounding fly fishing that is compelling in this imagery, especially as I was wont to do this week when I began imagining Jesus in waders out there on some river in Montana, just bringing it forth 10 and 4, 10 and 4. But it's fiction. Good fiction, but it's still fiction. And while fiction or myth often points us to a different way of seeing the truth, most scholars, when they hear this story, they already know what kind of net and what kind of fishing the disciples were doing. They were using seine or drag nets. So a drag net or a seine is the oldest type of fishing net, and it's found in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. They've seen it on pictures of Egyptian tomb paintings from the 3rd millennium BCE. And I was going down this rabbit hole as I was preparing for this sermon. And I said to Terry as we were walking out for 8 o'clock, I was like, this very well could have been an entire lecture about seine nets. This, of course, is not a sermon about the dimensions of or types of seine nets. But I happened to look them up, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it anyway. The types of seine nets are different, and there is an important reason. Like to get the picture of how they work and what they might have looked like and what how they kind of just operated in that time, I think unpacks the gospel a little bit better for us today. You can judge for yourself and let me know later. But the seine or the dragnet is 250 to 300 meters. It's just a huge piece of netting, and it's weighted at the bottom with sinkers, and the top has cork that allows it to float. And they will throw it out parallel to the shore, and it captures and confines fish by coming around them, by encirclement, surrounding them. Almost always through the work of multiple hands dragging it in slowly but surely. Now, once the hauling begins, the motion has to be continuous. As long as the net is advancing, the fish face the net trying to escape, rather than swimming away from it. However, if the pulling motion were even briefly stopped before the net reached the shore, the fish would be able to swim away. I'm not going to lie. This is the sort of metaphor preachers dream about. Especially when it's paired with today's gospel, a truly mind-bending but also mind-opening declaration from Jesus to Simon Peter that he should not be afraid because from now on, he's going to be fishing for people. Fishers of men is another way of it's often translated, and if you can get past the patriarchal use of men, it's just a wonderful phrase all around. You will fish for people. You will be fishers of men. Early in my life, the imagery of this grabbed a hold of me, especially when I was first discerning a call to ordained ministry. I had spent plenty of time fishing in my life. So I knew about the patience required to hook a fish, no matter how small. I also knew about the days when you could stand on the banks of a lake, unable to catch a cold, followed by days where, as soon as the line hits the water, you were reeling in another one. You have to assume that the disciples also knew this. They also knew this reality. They were ready to go back to the shore, back to their families, resolved to try their luck on a different day. And then, like he does, Jesus shows up and says, hey, whose boat is that? And they're like, ours? He's like, I'm going to use it to teach. And they're like, okay. And he goes out there and he starts teaching, and they think, okay, this is going to be over soon, and we're going to get to go home because the fishing's not happening again today. And he just does what Jesus does, and he sprinkles a little bit of extra on top of it for him. From the gospel, he said to Simon, put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Simon answered, Master, we have worked all night long, but we have caught nothing. Yet, if you say so, I will let down the nets. I'm adding the inflection here because these were accomplished fishermen, and yes, they probably had an inkling that they knew that this Jesus was different or special, but this was their domain, their territory. And I think there had to have been a few sideways glances between the Zebedee brothers and Simon Peter and saying, like, okay, well, I guess we'll try it again. So you can almost hear the resignation in the verse. And so they throw the nets back in, and they catch so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. Okay, back to our lecture on sign nets for a second. The utter suddenness of capture in sign net fishing, dragnet fishing, from the point of the view of the fish is super important. It's not like bait or fly fishing where the fish perceives something and then follows it out of curiosity or hunger, only to discover that that item actually means really bad news for them. No, so when a fish gets caught in a sign net, it's a complete change of reality, a complete altering of their world and the transformation that's going to take place. It's the ultimate bad day, you could say, because they're just swimming along, as you do. And maybe they feel the water shift. Maybe there's a slight disturbance. Maybe off in the distance they see something, but it doesn't look like a hook, so it's probably fine. And then all of a sudden, it happens. Suddenly, you and all your friends are being gathered in this big old net, and you're on the deck before you even know what happened to you. I don't know if there's a better way of describing what it means to encounter Jesus than that. Maybe yours was similar. Because this is how it happens, in my experience, even if it's not as dramatic as the road to Emmaus or any of the other conversion stories in the Bible. We're living our lives, swimming along, and then we have an encounter with the living person of Jesus, and everything changes. We are transformed. We are called, like Christ's disciples, to travel down the mountain after witnessing the transfiguration to now be Christ in and for the world. Who we were, no longer relevant, because who we are now is so radically different and so radically changed that we have no choice but to let the whole world know that we've been swept away by this dragnet of grace. And I think Simon Peter must have felt the same way, staring at that net full of fish, because his response says it all. Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching people. When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. I wonder what it looks like now to leave everything and follow him? This is a question that I pose to myself almost daily. And I think it's a fundamental principle that is often removed from Christian discipleship in the name of not wanting to expect too much from any of us. But I'm going to ask it again. What would it look like for you to leave everything and follow him? What would you have to leave behind? What might you need to renounce? And maybe more importantly, who might you become in that moment when you step away from those nets that have been weighing you down for so long, that have held you in place, and you say to the Lord, "Here am I." It's not an easy decision, and it's one that I think requires a consistent searching and experiencing of Jesus in our daily lives. Reminders that transformative moment where you can do nothing but fall to your knees and just like Peter yell out, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." The trick here, though, is that Jesus isn't meeting us, just like he wasn't meeting Peter, with condolences. He wasn't trying to say, "Oh, Brian, Peter, you're not that bad. Buck up, buddy. It's going to be good." Instead, he's saying, the time to be afraid is over. That's done. Now is the time to get to work. It's time to fish for people. It's time to be fishers of men. And I don't know if there's a better word of hope or liberation for the world right now than saying the love of God is like a sign net being tossed out into the world. Because it doesn't matter who you are, what sort of fish you have been or will become, because the dragnet of God rejects nothing in the sea. It brings it all in. It gathers and it welcomes all. Of course, it's not a love that removes your choice. People will always have a choice. They'll always have an opportunity to stand before the truth and the beauty and the love of God and say, "I'm not ready yet." But like any good fisherman knows, there's always another cast. There's always another moment to stand on the shore and toss a line and see what or who rises from the depths. And if I believe anything about God or about God's grace, it's this. That dragnet, that cast, that invitation never stops coming. When we say no or we choose the powers of the world over the powers of God, we do so not facing judgment, but instead a pause, a moment, a chance where we will once again in the future be able to say yes to the yes that was said to us before any of us were even born. And when it happens, we won't have to say, like we want to, and we sometimes feel we need to, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." We're going to feel the coal coming and topping our lips, and our minds and our hearts are going to be opened because we will know that we're standing in the presence of unconditional love, true justice, and we will feel the gentle touch of God on our shoulder and hear the voice saying, "Stand up, beloved. Come with me. I'm going to show you how to truly live." Amen.